Then she said, talk to you soon, which kind of threw me for a loop.
I bet you she's not coming.
Okay.
When she said her pain medications are saying no, I think that means she's not coming.
That's what I was wondering. Test, test. They're on. Hot mics.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Ottumwa City Council meeting. Before we get started, would everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Crystal, go ahead and take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Galloway.
Here.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Here.
Councilmember Hull.
Here.
Councilmember Pope. Mayor Johnson.
Here. The next item is to approve tonight's agenda. So do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
The next item is to identify any citizens that would like to speak on any of the agenda items tonight. And we have two individuals that would like to speak on number 6. Is there anybody else that wants to turn in a slip? Okay, thank you. Yep.
Resolution number 274, 2022, approving the surface and overhead navigation easement for Lot 1 of Ottumwa Airport Subdivision 5. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 274, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Zach.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few business items before the special meeting agenda. This one deals with the purchase agreement for Lot 1 of Airport Subdivision 5. That was authorized by Resolution 147 earlier this year. This resolution would approve the navigation easement, which was part of the purchase agreement and a condition for sale. It allows the functioning of the airport to be something that can't really be infringed upon by any activity that happens on the lot.
Council have any questions for Zach? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Resolution number 275, 2022, authorizing the mayor to execute a public utility easement for a portion of a vacated alley in the city of Ottumwa. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 275, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Zach, I believe you're going to address this item as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Resolution 213 authorized disposing of a section of vacated alley for the new BP station on West 2nd Street. This resolution approves a public utility easement, which would allow public utilities to still use that portion of the alley for what's needed there. This was also a condition of that purchase agreement. We'll move the project closer to closing on the sale of that property.
Council have any questions for Zach? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Resolution number 276, 2022, approving change order number 5 for the North Market Facade Improvements Project. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 276, 2022.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, Zach.
All right, the North Market Facade Project received a community development block grant for $250,000. The remainder of the project is funded by the existing downtown development grant program and by the property owners. This change order addresses that the top withe of brick at 105, 107 North Market was completely loose and would need to be redone, new mortar, and install those bricks again. The adjustment is for $13,365.51, which does use the remaining project contingency balance of $2,201.70 and also increases the contract sum by $11,163.81. of which the city's share would be 25%, which is still less than the total eligibility under the existing facade program and is less than what was budgeted for the original project.
Was this something that couldn't be identified at the time that they took bids?
No, because they had to remove the entire, the paneling, the cheese grater that was there in order to ascertain the condition of the brick.
Does council have any questions for Zach?
So with the contingency being gone now, if there are any other change orders that need to come through, is that going to be on the same split for responsibility that the original grant request was done, or how's that going to work?
So the project originally, the opinion of cost was somewhere around $350,000 or, well, let me just check that. I think it was around $350,000. The original bid was actually $277,000, so it was below cost and below what was originally budgeted. The city would continue, if there were future change orders, the city would still do 25% up to the total amount of our existing downtown development grant program. So if the change orders exhaust what we do, which is 25% up to $20,000 per facade, if they exhaust that amount, then the building owners would be responsible for the entire additional portion.
Okay.
Well, whatever's left from the grant and then the building owners.
Okay, thanks.
And the property owner understands that, correct?
Correct.
Any other questions from council for Zach? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Staff report on 510 North Court.
Zach, I believe you're going to cover this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This doesn't require any action. Some folks just thought it'd be good to provide a report on this. The council condemned the property at 510 North Court. And Dan Larson, who had received the contract to demolish 437 North Court, was already mobilized about a block away. And since he was there and he saw that happened, he put in a bid anticipating that he could reduce his total bid cost by doing the same project while he was still mobilized in that area. And he offered $9,400, which would be $4,900 for asbestos abatement and $4,500 for the demolition of the property. Those items were less than what was anticipated and compared favorably to other projects that have been awarded so far this year. And sort of take advantage of the contractor already being mobilized. Staff followed the purchasing policy that's already laid out, and staff already did award that contract directly rather than going through the sealed bids in order to take advantage of the cost savings.
Does council have any questions for Zach? We don't need any approval of that, correct? Okay, the next item is Heartland Humane discussion. Phil, are you going to start this?
Yes, sir, Honorable Mayor. So the agreement with Heartland Humane, who currently provides holding of animals that are dogs and cats that are collected in the city. The agreement is due to expire at the end of this year, and so we wanted to update and revise that. Had met previously with the group. There was some concerns about the funding for the shelter and the availability of maintaining the service based off of the costs. And so we worked on trying to help clarify some of the language in the agreement, and then also looking at increasing the amount of compensation to the group as well. Currently, under the agreement, the city contributes $5 of every dog license that's sold in the city, and that goes to Heartland Humane. And then if there is anything that we collect from owners, that is also used and offsets some of the costs that go into the impounding of the animals. There's also additional fees. So if an animal requires a parvo vaccination, a flea treatment, rabies vaccination, any of those things, those fees are also passed on to the owner and then paid to the Heartland Humane. Any other revenue that they receive would come from adoptions of animals, from donations, from the public, and I think they get a small contribution from the county, and I'm not aware of any other direct contributions other than donations from public entities or individuals. And as we heard at, I think it was the last meeting or a recent meeting, they're running anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 in costs annually, and the $6,000 to $7,000 that we give from the license fees doesn't go very far when all that comes into count. So aside from any of the language revisions here and trying to not only kind of help clean up the procedures and process and the expectations by both sides, there was also the public purpose statement, the entry of this, which has also helped strengthen to indicate why we would take taxpayer dollars and put it towards this organization. And quite frankly, for that cost, we wouldn't be able to do this ourselves. And so it is a mutually beneficial relationship and has that public purpose that is necessary for us to look at taxpayer dollars. One of the things that was added in this was looking at a base fee, and that was looking at, and the numbers that were used previously was a rate of $10 per day per animal. So looking at that and talking with Officer Williams on the average number of animals that he would collect and be held in any typical 7-day period would be about 10. And I think our prior agreement had reserved 10 dogs, 10 cats. Well, this would say 10 kennels of any dog or cat. Most times it's dogs, but having that availability. And so if we looked at $10 per animal per day times 365 days a year, that amount looked at factored out to $36,500. So we look at whether we have animals in there or not. We would say the city would pay quarterly, 1/4 of that. So about $9,125 a quarter would go to them as a direct payment. That would be basically reserving that space for any of those future animals. Now, if there are vaccinations required, if there are other things, if there are any animals beyond the 10 animals, so we get a 20 animal seizure and the 10 kennels are available, the first 10 are there, and there's 10 more kennels available, Heartland Humane could take those. We would look to pay at that per day, the $10 per animal per day rate for the remainder of those animals. So they're not out if there's more animals than that and there's space available. Heartland Humane could take those and then they would just charge us that and bill us on a monthly basis. There was one revision I wanted to make, or clarification I wanted to make, and it was in a definition here talking about the 7-day hold period. That should be 7 calendar days. So I just want to add in the word calendar, and that's under 4A, that minimum shelter. Just to clarify, it would be 7 calendar days. And then from that, I would open it up to any other questions or comments, or I think you had people on.
Does council have any questions for Phil before I open it up to the other individuals that would like to speak on this topic?
I do. So Phil, on page 3 under, I think it's 4B, it talks about the owner needs to go to the police station to reclaim the animal. And then it talks about fees, but something I don't see in there, does that, when they reclaim the animal, if the animal is not licensed, do they have to pay that licensing fee there too? And
If the animal is not the animal should be licensed. And I don't know if Officer Williams is here. Do we require licensure of the animals as part of that process before turning that over?
Yes, it has to be licensed and vaccinated, proof of vaccination before we release the animal.
awesome.
So that's part of the reason why we go through this process, the reclamation by owner, going through law enforcement, is making sure that they have all of that taken care of and then pay any costs that are associated with that.
Perfect. And then I have another question that I don't think is in this, but if, so once like the animal is turned over to Heartland, and I think maybe this is a question for Heartland, but like when an animal is going to get adopted, do you build in the licensing fees to that adopted animal?
I was about to say, we don't build that into, no.
Animal can be leaving the county.
Well, but they have to provide addresses, correct? Yeah, so I mean, so the ones that are sitting or are city animals, then is there a way we can work together to build that in? Because that increases your payback of those license fees too. Okay. So it sounds like that was a process and it didn't happen? So I guess what I'm saying is, how much does it cost to adopt a dog or a cat or a dog? 175, and to license it's 25?
It's either 10 or 20
Oh, 10 or 20. What's the difference?
if they're spayed or neutered.
Okay, so it's gonna be probably 10, so then 175, so we build it into 185, and then we have, so it's built into the cost. So then they adopt the dog, they get the license, and then.
You guys haven't passed. Yeah, we've never done that, so, I mean, we'd have to give them a set of tag numbers.
Okay, well, I'm just thinking like in the long run, that'll help increase your license payback too, so.
Especially if it's required for the city, that would make sense.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's-
Okay, that's all I had.
Does any other council have questions for Phil?
I guess I just clarify, kind of based off of that question was licensure. So when the city licenses that the thought would be the revenue coming from those licenses would be going towards that 36.5. It was not meant to be in addition to the 36.5. But as we go forward, then yeah, that is part of the revenue that goes back to Heartland Humane.
Correct.
So it's important to license the animals.
Okay, if council doesn't have any other questions for Phil, I'm going to go ahead and call on the individuals that wanted to speak on this item, and we'll start with Garrett Ross. So if you come up to the microphone and give your name and your address, please.
You bet. Garrett Ross, 611 North Hancock at the Y, I guess. My address is actually outside of the city, but anyway, so just, yeah, speaking on behalf of Heartland Humane Society, we got a chance as a board to kind of review this documentation, and appreciate Phil for providing this to us so we could kind of review it. A lot of this does look good to us as well. One of the big things probably that after we discussed and we ran some of our numbers and expenses, that $10 per animal per day amount has actually been in verbiage for quite some time. From what we've been informed, ever since we've started holding the animal control contract, it's been at $10 per animal per day. So that's been years and years. So when we started to run those numbers, our expenses actually are much closer to $15 per animal per day as well. And really looking at that in comparison to what we found is kind of a market rate for our area, which is closer to $18 to $20 per animal per day. Once again, we still feel as though that's still a really good deal for both the city and still a reasonable and fair amount for Humane Society as well. So we would love to see that both in the overcharges at $15 per animal per day, along with that base contract that would most likely take that from $36,500 to closer to $54,000 annually. But that would get us much closer to the expenses that we incur in actually providing this service to the city as well. And I don't think that there was any other major items that jumped out to us. Any questions in reference to that?
I know one of the things that I had asked earlier, and I know it's not going to probably be a lot of money because most of these animals come from the city of Ottumwa, but have you tried to talk to the other cities within Wapello County as well as Wapello County Board of Supervisors to see if they're willing to contribute anything towards your operation?
As a matter of fact, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 3 different city council meetings that we're going to be attending here very soon. Eddyville, Agency, Fremont, Bloomfield as well. Basically, we went down the list of these animals, and when they are surrendered to us, we get where they came from, generally a city or if they're just out in the county. And so we basically went by priority. Where do we see the most animals come from? And we're going to be connecting with those organizations as well. So we are on the agenda for 3 that we know of.
We've met with the county already, and just really have, to my knowledge, we don't have an answer from the county.
Yeah,
You're still waiting to hear back from the Wapello County Board of Supervisors?
that is correct.
Because I would hope they would contribute something.
Yeah, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Pam, do we receive an annual amount from the county? And I'm trying to think about how much it is, Shelley, or maybe I'm crazy as well too. Is it around $1,000 a year from the county? Yep, about $1,000 a year from the county.
So it's pretty minimal.
Yes. Compared to, I think, like I said, as Shelley corrected me last time as well at the meeting, I believe last year's annual budget was about $350,000. So $1,000 a year is a small portion of that expense.
Does council have any questions for Garrett?
So to that point, I guess, what's the split between what's coming in from the city of Ottumwa versus what's coming in from Wapello County?
I will say that, once again, I'm going to lean on my crew here. The percentage wise, in terms of the number of animals that come from the city of Ottumwa, greatly outweigh the rest of the areas, including the county and the other communities as well.
For example, the community, not our county, provides about 1 animal a month.
Yeah, versus the city of Ottumwa, where we can get,
North of us provides less than 1 animal a month.
yeah.
The bulk of the animals, folks, come from the city of Ottumwa.
Pam, would you feel comfortable in saying roughly 60 to 70% of the animals that come to Heartland come from the city of Ottumwa? Yeah, so saying roughly 60 to 70% of the animals that come to our shelter are from the city of Ottumwa. Not necessarily through the animal control contract, but are animals that were either owner surrenders or through the animal control contract itself. Yes.
If I may interject, from January 1 to October 29th, there were 343 dogs brought in from the city of Ottumwa. Now, Jeff didn't bring them all in, but there was 343 dogs. So like Eddyville, Fremont, Bloomfield, their numbers are pretty minuscule, but we're still going to visit with them.
Yeah.
We need help.
So
So if 70% come from the city limits of Ottumwa, then would it be fair to say the other 30% are from these other towns?
yes, generally
within
speaking,
Wapello County?
county and outlying communities such as Eddyville, Agency, some of those other outliers as well. We're pretty much up until you get up to Oskaloosa. I think Oskaloosa is the next closest animal shelter. Yeah. So, and they have actually, I think, in terms of their total capacity, I think they're about half of what we can handle as well. Am I correct? Yeah. So they're about half of what we can handle as a total shelter. So generally speaking, we're going to be the first stop for a lot of places. So,
Is Oskaloosa no kill shelter too, or do you know?
yes, they are.
They are.
Yep. That's Stevens Memorial, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of how many are the city of Ottumwa animals are surrenders versus ones that are picked up by Officer Williams?
Well, right now, since we've been so full, I haven't been taking.
Owner surrenders.
Owner surrenders because I'm getting all these strains.
Yeah. So obviously, once again, once we get to a limit, which has been a crazy swing over the last 2 years, obviously with COVID, there was a point at which during COVID, we were almost out of animals, which was a wonderful problem to have. Unfortunately, we've swung the other direction. So, but right now, once again, once we get to capacity, obviously the city's kennels are always available at that point, but accepting those strays, but we can't always accept owner surrenders at this time. So somebody might come to us and say, I can't feed this animal anymore. I can't take care of them. I would like to surrender them to the shelter, and we can't accept them at that time. So we give them recommendations of other places they might be able to take the animal.
So what is your current capacity for dogs and current capacity for cats, roughly?
We ran that number. What is that? I think it was,
Like, 50.
50.
Dogs.
Yep.
And,
52 dogs,
like 46 cats.
46 cats. And I think that, and we've even got some extra space that we don't like to use. Yeah. And so there's some extra space and maybe some outdoor kennels, obviously in the wintertime, in which it's not safe or effective to utilize those. So that can ebb and flow from the season. But yes.
What do you do? So if Officer Williams brings a pet in, what do you do because we have 7 days. So how do we kind of broadcast that this pet came in? Do we do that at all? Because I know that some people, I mean, you see it on Facebook sometimes too, like, oh, I'm looking for this dog.
We actually have 2 different Facebook pages. And one of them, because part of the agreement is that we have to post the animals that come in. So that is on us. So after Officer William brings them to us, we will actually post a picture of that animal on the animal control Facebook page. Because I believe in the old contract is set on the website, but there's not even a place for us on the website now to be able to post that. But we have a Facebook page that is Ottumwa Animal Control. We post a picture of that animal for that duration, say when they came in, where they came from roughly, and post a picture of the animal as well. So for that period. And then after that, I believe, Pam, am I crazy? But we posted it on our Facebook page as well. So that way it gets out to more people, just letting them know that it is a stray that was found, even though it's not up for adoption yet, it is still in the animal control holding at that point. So we have those 2 Facebook pages are the main ways, the most effective means for us to get that communication out to people.
Just to clarify too, one of the reasons why having this base fee portion in there is because we do have the main part of this agreement is that hold period, that 7 days. Correct. Where we have an obligation to house these animals somewhere that they could be reclaimed. We don't have that capacity, which is why we want to maintain this agreement, this arrangement with Heartland Humane. And based off those numbers, that's about 10% of your capacity. After that 7-day hold period, it's in here that the animal can be relinquished over to Heartland Humane. And at that point, it may sound cold, but the city as the entity doesn't have a worry about what happens to the animal.
Correct.
The fact that they're a no-kill shelter as a humane level is, I like that part of it. But from the city standpoint, if the animal were to be turned loose, if it were to be, disposed of in a different way, not paying for it, that part isn't there. So that cost then does become the obligation of Heartland Humane. So there's that 10% we're looking at, even though 70% of the animals may come from the city, 10% are roughly what we're looking at under this agreement.
Yeah. Okay, Phil, on page 4, paragraph, it's under 5A, 1, 2, 3, paragraph 4, it still references the city's police website for them to post information. And it sounds like they don't have access to that, or there's no place to put that. So I think we need to change that or make a place available. It sounds like we're using Facebook at this point, but if we're still using a website or going to, then we need to make that available.
Do you know, Officer Williams, if that is still available? I thought it was.
They have access to the animal control page.
Yeah, the Facebook page specifically. So this
says website.
I think this says the city police's website. So we're just utilizing Facebook specifically. I don't think there's a spot on the website itself. No,
So
it's just the animal control Facebook page.
Then?
Animal control Facebook page specifically.
And I
Make
don't
that
know.
change.
I have a question that I don't know who to address it to, but when someone goes to register their pet, besides getting a receipt for them paying, is there any information that says here's the different websites or here's the different phone numbers you can call if your pet is missing?
So when they license them or when they
When
adopt?
they license them.
License them. That would be with the city?
Yeah, we just tell them to check our Facebook page. A lot of times people call in on the telephone and say, I'm missing this dog. And then we just tell them, check our Facebook page, or we'll give them the description of the dog that we have.
Okay, I was just thinking it's another avenue of getting the information out if they had all them numbers right out of the chute,
Yeah.
So on the Facebook page, is there just basic information about the animal, or is there actually pictures?
There's pictures.
There's photographs, location where the dog was found, and the description of it.
Any identifying factors about the animal, wearing an orange collar, things such as that. So.
Does the council have any other questions for Garrett?
Yeah, just a real quick question, Garrett, and forgive me because I think that you actually said this the last time you presented.
Okay, go ahead.
And just very surface level, I don't really want to get into too much detail about it. You said that the shelter is operating at a loss right now.
That is correct.
Roughly how much?
I think we were having that conversation earlier, somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000 a month.
Okay, so you're looking
roughly.
at,
And that obviously can ebb and flow. Being a no-kill shelter, when an animal comes into our care, we're going to take a general assessment of that animal and make sure that they are well. And if they need any veterinary care at that time, we'll assess that. So that is one big factor.
sure.
Obviously, if we get any kind of animal that's come in with some kind of significant injury or alike, then we're going to take the necessary action to make sure that that animal is well.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
so yeah, so that can ebb and flow, but roughly, like I said, it's somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 a month.
Okay. And again, forgive me, I might not have heard, are you making presentation to the Wapello County supervisors on this?
We have already done so.
I did that earlier in the year.
Yep,
Okay.
he did that earlier this year, and at this
we're at
point, we have
$1,000.
not.
Haven't got an answer to my knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah. So last time, I believe at this point, it has basically stood at $1,000 a year that the Wapello County supervisors have contributed to Heartland Humane Society, and that's been for quite some time, essentially. But I don't believe it has gone up, but we have made the pitch to them that we do need support, and we would like to increase that, but we have not yet heard back from them. Don, do you know roughly when that was that we presented to them? Okay, so it would have been October, so maybe a couple of months ago.
Okay. It just, to me, it would make sense. They do have a vested interest, even though a majority of the animals might be coming from inside the community, they're still part of the community. So I would think that they would have a vested interest in participating in this. So that's.
And I think one thing that may be a little bit different, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe right now the county, if any of the county officers, the sheriffs or deputies, if they pick up an animal, do they go to Heartland Humane, or not, excuse me, Heartland, but to Eastview? No? Yeah, they go to Eastview Animal Hospital. So
Okay.
they're paying those veterinary boarding rates, and then I'm not sure after the mandatory hold period, what takes place at that point, so.
Well, pit bulls, they, I'm placement for, and if it's just a normal, regular breed dog, then they'll fall if we have one.
So,
That was going to be a question I was going to ask of Officer Williams. If you go and pick up a pit bull, where do you take them since they're not supposed to be allowed to be in the city limits of Ottumwa?
that's been a challenge.
We're working on that question. It is a good question because right now we are taking them to Heartland. And because we're trying to figure out which vet we can use. We're no longer using Pipestone as our pound. So we're in the process of trying to communicate with vets in town.
To see if any of them are willing to take pit bulls temporarily at least?
Yeah, so temporarily right now, we're still taking them to Heartland.
And we transport
And
them.
then we transport them out.
Yeah.
It costs our employees to take care of the dogs.
My car, me, myself, and some others transport them out, volunteering, and our employees take care of them.
We have other rescues or shelters come from outside to take control of the dog. They can't keep them there after the 7 day.
So that's been a little bit of a challenge for us as well. And like I said, from our understanding at this point, the shelter is within city limits. After we had a conversation with city zoning and alike, they have informed us that we are within city limits at this point too. So that does apply to us as well. So a little bit of a sticky situation.
Does council have any other questions for Garrett? Is anyone else in the audience want to speak on this agenda item? I know we have a couple other people that want to speak on item number 6 when we get to that, but is there anybody else that wants to speak on the Heartland Humane contract? Okay, thank you, Garrett.
Thank you, council.
I guess just for clarification before we move on, the change of the Facebook page, that makes sense instead of the website. There was also one other thing brought up by Garrett about the rate. I don't know
I
if
would like to
there's-
see it increase to $15 if that's what their, if that mirrors kind of what their expenses are, then I think that we should look at that.
So the thought being, from my perspective, just for council and the community's benefit, this is all, or I should say the majority of this is new cost, new expense to us. And it would be in effect sometime after the first of the year here, pending council approval of the actual agreement itself, which isn't up for tonight, will be brought back in the very near future. the thought with the cost for this is something that is considered a public safety expense, animal control. This is something that is eligible for the franchise fees that were approved earlier. We will start getting some of that revenue after the first of the year, before the next fiscal year. We would be able to utilize some of those funds for making these costs. So to answer the question about where would these funds come from, that would be eligible if that is something that the council wanted to do, to utilize those new revenues to take care of this new expense.
Because I think you bring up a good point. If the $10 per day per animal hasn't been changed for years, that needs to be looked at because your costs have continued to increase. So I'm glad you brought that up.
We were informed it's been over a decade. It's,
Is there any way, just out of curiosity, that we could get a breakdown of where you're coming up with that number, whether it's $12, $15, $18, whatever that number is? Can we get a breakdown of actually what that cost is made up of?
And when you say the current market rate is $18, $20 per animal per day, is that based on you checking with other surrounding shelters and that's the information they gave you?
boarding facilities locally and veterinary services that have overnight boarding services.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this agenda item before we move forward? Like Phil said, this will be brought back for approval in the near future. So we're not taking any formal action on it tonight.
No, but if I had some general consensus on that rate, I don't need a formal motion necessarily, but is that a general consensus on adjusting that, or did you want to wait
I
and
guess
see?
I would like to see what that number actually is before we make a decision. That's just me.
Okay. Yeah, same.
I agree.
Okay. All right. So we do have 2 more meetings before the end of the year. One would be next Tuesday. One would be that 2 weeks after that, in order to get the contract before
In
you
effect for
again.
January 1.
Oh.
Okay.
I'll work with the board or Garrett or whoever to get those numbers. So Don, yeah.
I called Eastview to get their daily rate. I talked to Chanel. I got hold of Darren Madison's boarding facility. I talked to another veterinary clinic. So those rates at $18 to $20, that's all local places where you can take your animal on board.
And I think he's more referencing your guys' costs to
Yeah.
to go from 10 to 15, just to see that detailed out.
So our light energy bills went up.
Yep.
Our bills went up, truck
Mhm.
bills went up.
So we can break that down for you.
Perfect.
For that $15 per animal per
Yep.
day.
Thank you.
We can give you a breakdown of what that $15 consists of.
Awesome. Thank you, Garrett.
No problem. Try to get that to you within a week.
Perfect.
Okay, if there's no further discussion on the Heartland Humane contract, we'll move to the ATV and UTV ordinance discussion. And Phil, are you going to start the discussion on this?
Yes, Honorable Mayor, I can do that. So it was brought up earlier this year, and been doing some research and working with staff and looking at other communities. This kind of all started when the state passed House File 2130, and that had some impact on ATV and UTV usage across the state. However, one thing that it did not impact, it did not just all of a sudden mandate that they could be driven in every city and everywhere in the state. Municipalities still had the ability to regulate if and when these vehicles could be driven on city streets. And so that was one of the big misnomers with that, with the passage of that House File 2130. Our current ordinance basically just allowed for the usage of the vehicles on the frozen ponds in Greater Ottumwa Park. So that was one of the things that was to be looked at was, do we want to allow the usage of the vehicles on city streets or not, and part of the reason for the work session. From the research of looking at what different communities have done or are looking at doing, the biggest thing that I noticed in any of those was the distinction between ATVs, UTVs, snowmobiles, and golf carts. And even the state breaks out golf carts as a separate entity when looking at usage, if it is or is not allowed on city streets. And so that is one thing that if the city council wanted to open up the usage of any of these vehicles on city streets, I would recommend that we definitely look at each of these vehicles individually and perhaps decide on if and when they are going to be allowed. For example, if you wanted to allow golf carts on streets, that doesn't mean that you have to allow ATVs and UTVs. If you wanted to allow UTVs and golf carts, doesn't mean that ATVs have to necessarily be allowed. Those are discretions that are before you and how you want to define those and look to do that. These vehicles are made for different purposes, and so I think they can be looked at in their individual characteristics. The other thing to consider is the safety of the individuals that are using them, the safety of traffic in general. I know we have some law enforcement here that can help with that. When you have a slower moving vehicle, that has the ability to impact traffic and traffic flow and patterns. And in our rush here and there society, if you have a slower moving vehicle and then you get someone trying to pass that legally or illegally on a city street, or now getting past that vehicle that just turned and picking up the pace 20, 30 miles per hour faster, does that have an impact? Does that create some unsafe things? When you decide to open up the streets and you have it available to drive in certain areas, let's say you have something on one side of the river and the other side of the river. Well, now you've also opened it up that the vehicle has the ability to travel to the most direct point from one side of the river to the other. Do you want to open it up the bridges for the use of these vehicles? And what that's going to be. Wapello, I think, is 45 miles per hour. If you have a vehicle that can't, the tops out at a slower speed, or our regulation says can't go faster than 35, well, now it has the ability to cross that bridge. And there's accidents between cars on there right now without it having a slower moving vehicle. These are some of the things I think that need to be taken into consideration as we look at this.
So for purposes of clarification, could you just real briefly say what the main differences are between an ATV and a UTV?
Yeah, so there are some definitions that are used in state law. Let's see if I can pull those up here quickly. And I think Burlington recently had passed their law, and they had defined use definitions for those. So this is from the city of Burlington and what they use. An all-terrain vehicle, or ATV, under their code, means a motorized flotation tire vehicle with not less than 3 low-pressure tires, I'm guessing. Where's the code? Sorry, I lost the code. Here we go. All right. All-terrain, not less than 3 low-pressure tires, but more than 6 low-pressure tires, or a 2-wheeled off-road motorcycle that is limited in engine displacement to less than 800 cc's and in total dry weight to less than 750 pounds, that has a seat or saddle designed to be straddled by the operator and handlebars for steering control. 2-wheeled off-road motorcycles shall be considered all-terrain vehicles only for the purpose of titling and registration. An operator or of a 2-wheeled off-road motorcycle is exempt from the safety instruction and certification program requirements of section 321G.23 and 321G.24 of the Code of Iowa. Snowmobile means a motorized vehicle weighing less than 1,000 pounds, which uses sled-type runners or skis, endless belt-type tread, or any combination of runners, skis, or tread, and is designed for travel on snow or ice. And a utility terrain vehicle, or UTV, or an off-road vehicle, or ORV, means a motorized flotation tire vehicle with not less than 4 low-pressure tires, but not more than 8 low-pressure tires that is limited in engine displacement to less than 1,500 cc's, and in total dry weight, not more than 2,000 pounds, and has a seat that is a bucket or bench design, not intended to be straddled by the operator, and steering wheel or control levers or for control. Off-road utility vehicle does not include dune buggies, golf carts, go-karts, or mini trucks. And that is the definition that they're using within their code.
So simply put, a UTV is a little bit larger than an ATV and it's more powerful, based on what I heard you say.
Yeah, they're
There's some other things too, but is that kind of the main difference?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this, but from what I've seen, the design and other things typically look a little bit better, different as well. A lot of times UTVs will have a frame, and other characteristics like that.
Okay, thank you. Does council have any questions for Phil?
I was going to say the other thing to take into consideration is enforcement of this. So one of the changes with the state law was requirements for licensure and insurance or insurability, being 18 years of age, and some other characteristics like that. So if we open it up, we are now increasing the requirements on enforcement. If we do not have it on city streets, if there's a vehicle on a city street and an officer sees that, they know it's not supposed to be there, it's a lot easier to enforce that. Then is that person of age? Do they have the proper documentation? Do they meet the proper requirements? There's some other things that increase with enforcement as well. So those are some things that I think all need to be weighed into this decision.
So what's happening now? Are people getting ticketed if they're driving these in the city limits of Ottumwa?
Well, there are several that we find around town, but we typically are doing other things that they're on, there's a little traffic stop on them. It's generally people who just don't understand what the law is right now. You can kind of tell they're going slow, it's just crossing Highway 34, Quincy, things like that. So right now, we're like law enforcement, we're doing other things, and we don't have any direction on what we're supposed to be stopping them for. We know we're not supposed to be on there, so if we do get a chance, we'll stop them, tell them the law has changed for the city limits, and they'll have to use the city council before it's authorized. Then they say, okay, thanks, and off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're doing.
Because I guess one of my concerns would be if the council decides to allow them in the city limits and you have to be at least 18 years of age and have a valid driver's license, it's really going to be hard for a police officer to see some young person driving one of those. Are they 16? Are they 17? Are they 18? Basically, you're going to have to stop every single one of them and ask them to show you your driver's license.
There's a conflict there. You can't do that just in general, right, public, ours. So there's going to be some issues, obviously. We're going to have to address.
Yeah, the enforcement could become somewhat complicated. Anybody?
Just a clarification on you were asking about the differences. An ATV is something that you straddle. A UTV is something that you sit in a seat. So UTV would have a seat to it with a back and possibly seat belts and stuff like that. An ATV is like a four-wheeler or a three-wheeler where you straddle the seat and then ride. So that's the major differences in those two obstacles.
Thank you. Any other questions from council for Phil before I open it up to the other people that want to speak? Okay, we have two individuals that have indicated they'd like to speak. The first individual is Steve Edgington, and please come up to the microphone, state your name and your address, please.
My name is Steve Edgerton. I live at 131 Linwood Avenue, Ottumwa. I used to be superintendent of public works for the city, so I had a lot of running around this town doing various things. I was superintendent for 13 years and worked for the city for 23. I also worked part-time at RJ Performance. I was somewhat instrumental in creating the ordinance for the county. I went to 20 different counties, got their ordinances, put an ordinance together for Wapello County, and then took it to the supervisors, and they said what they would like to keep in it, what they didn't like to keep in it, and that ordinance was passed. You were talking about, I used to work part-time at RJ's, like I said, so I know a little bit about ATVs and UTVs. UTVs, like I said, is a seat that you straddle, and he was very competent in what he said as far as UTVs have bench seats. In the ordinances that we were looking at, and I don't know what you have or don't have, I haven't seen it. Most of the time, they were on UTVs, they were required to have the same safety devices and lighting as a car or any other vehicle on the street. UTVs really can't accomplish that, or ATVs usually can't accomplish that. The only time I'd ever want to see really a ATV on the street is if during snow emergency or something, because they like to use them to clean driveways and sidewalks and have you. UTVs, the people that own them usually are a lot more careful. Those things cost between $15,000 to $35,000. It's pretty much like buying a car. And if you buy one of those, you're going to take care of it. You're not going to be tearing up anything. The ATVs, over the years that I worked for the city, that was a bit of a problem. People would like to jump up on the levees and a few other things. And of course, motorized vehicles were restricted at the time. When we were doing the ordinance for the county, they wouldn't pull somebody over simply for the fact that they thought maybe they weren't legally of age. However, if they were breaking some sort of ordinance and needed to pull them over, then they had just cause to check and see what their age is. The county also required anybody that was operating a vehicle with somebody else with them with a permit, they had to be certified that they had taken safety courses for either ATVs or UTVs in order to operate them. They inspected all their vehicles that was going to be driven, and they created a tag process. So they knew that vehicle had been safety inspected for all the necessary equipment, such as seat belts and lights, trying to think. But anyway, they made, well, exhaust and everything. Everything that was designed to be on that needed to be on that functionally and working. I think it's a great idea to allow the UTVs inside the city. You can restrict them that they have to stay off of roads 45 miles an hour or higher. But they do work, they are nice for like grocery getters and stuff where you don't need a big car and stuff. The ATVs, I assume, I would just as soon see them be for the wintertime type stuff or for removal of snow. I think that's about what I have.
Does council have any questions they'd like to ask Mr. Edgington?
Just one really quick question. The one thing that you didn't mention in the county ordinance was insurance. Are they required to hold
They were
insurance?
required to have insurance. They had to have proof of insurance cards with them and all.
So I'm assuming there was it the minimum coverage, or is it just like
Yeah, it's
liability, or
just,
do they
it's
have
just like if it was a regular vehicle,
Okay.
a car, whatever. Part of that is kind of exempt is farmers are exempt from those ordinances because they're considered farm equipment. This is more for the novelist or people that just want to run around on them and stuff.
Steve, you said Wapello County had some kind of safety training people needed to complete. How did that, who did that? Where did they get that at?
They don't do the training, but there's courses given, and I'm not really sure whether it's a DNR or who does it. I'm sure the county supervisors could let you know what that is.
So as far as the county's concerned, they had to show some kind of proof that they completed this kind of a training.
Right. Along with their proof of insurance. And like I say, once their vehicle was inspected and it passed inspection, then they had a tag they were to put on the back of it.
Any other questions for Mr. Edgington? Okay, thank you, Steve. Next, we have Lisa McConnell. State your name and your address, please.
Yes, Lisa McConnell at 10202 155th Avenue, Ottumwa. And I'm here to speak to the UTV. I knew it was being discussed and have been kind of watching it. We purchased a new UTV side-by-side from Ross Motorsports last year and really have enjoyed it. Ours drives like a little car. It's got a steering wheel, a dash, a foot feed, power steering, brakes, seat belts. It actually won't move very fast at all, hardly crawls if the seat belt's not fastened. It's a safety. We carry insurance on ours just like we do our vehicle. They're our insurance company. And we buy a sticker from the courthouse over here every year for it. So I know that they're able to be licensed and there's a sticker available for them. And we just see it as a great opportunity for fun. It's relaxing. We enjoy it. And I know other, areas are finding ways to make it work for their communities. And we would love to see that happen here.
Does council have any questions for Lisa McConnell? Okay, well, thank you for sharing your comments. So do you have any other input or anything else you'd like to say, Phil, on this?
Well, just in general, I guess what I would need is direction from city council on where you are at with this. And did you want to have a drafted revision to the code or leave it as is? I'm sorry, I should say one thing, and Gene may want to speak to this just a little bit, is in our current code, it talks about driving on the ponds. And I know that we have recently changed where we stock the trout. And so we'll want to change this to some degree, at least just to reflect that and not having any vehicles driving where ice fishing is going on.
That's correct. The trout pond is now moved to the east side of Wapello Street, and it's heavily used in the winter by ice fishermen. The pond that the motorcycles used to use is the pond that is now being filled in. So if you're going to allow motorcycles on any of the ponds, it would have to be on the west side of Wapello Street in the campground, but I'd be very careful about designating a pond for usage by ATVs, UTVs, or motorcycles.
Say that one more time.
The pond that is being stocked with trout is on the east side of Wapello Street now. Ice fishermen use it all winter long, so you cannot allow motorized vehicles on that pond.
So there will be at least a minor revision we'd want to make at a minimum to the current code to reflect that and make sure that safety is paramount there. But the larger question is on the streets. And if any of the vehicles, such as was recommended by the public for the UTVs, is something you want to consider, golf carts, ATVs, etc.
So Phil, at the beginning, you identified that let me clarify. So you identified that we should break it down, ATVs, UTVs, snowmobiles, golf carts, or that if we are going to adjust it, we should look at looking at those four areas like the state does.
So my recommendation would be against having ATVs driving on city streets. And so if you were wanting to allow any vehicles of the classifications, that you would break it out. If the intent of the council was to have no slow moving vehicles allowed on city streets, then you wouldn't really have to do anything as far as, breaking that out. So pretty much if you were looking at any of them, my recommendation would be against the ATV aspect. I think just based on the safety, the usage of them, the ability from them to go from pavement to off-roading and, creating potential issues with that. They're much easier, I think, as mentioned, going on levees, going onto trails where we don't want them, things like that. There's more issue with the ATV usage potentially than many of these other vehicles. And cost is one of those things, I think, to look at as well, as if somebody's going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a vehicle, I don't know that they're going to be driving it recklessly in that same way as somebody that spends a little bit less and maybe is of a more youthful age.
Have you received any kind of feedback from our law enforcement about their feelings about ATVs and UTVs?
The biggest thing that is been mentioned is just, how do we enforce it? And if we were to open that up, again, that comes into that ATV aspect of it, being able to move from one surface to the other. And if we don't have similar style vehicles to pursue, or going through a pursuit that now goes into a park area or whatever else it might be, that creates safety not only for our staff, but for people that are being pursued or other people that are innocent in that process or in the pathway. So pursuit, enforcement, those are some of the key things as far as where their concern is.
So what's the pleasure of the council? Would you like to have a draft ordinance developed so you can take a look at something concrete?
Yeah, I would. But one of the things that, and is a word that a couple of people have used tonight, is reckless. And I think that we need to look beyond the fact of reckless to the vehicle itself. But, we talk about reckless to the extent of driving on trails, driving in places that they shouldn't be driving. We're talking about something that's 1,500, 2,000 pounds on a trail that was not designed for that. So should it be allowed on that? Should it be allowed someplace where the speed limit's 45 mile an hour when we know that people are driving in excess of 45 mile an hour at times? We're putting more people than just that driver in danger. So I think that we probably shouldn't be quick to do this just to get it done, do it right the first time. I agree. I don't think that the ATVs are a good idea in town. I definitely think that golf carts in town is dangerous. While everybody was talking, I was looking up the average speed of a golf cart. It's 12 to 15 mile an hour. They're going to get rear-ended every time they turn around a corner if we let those things loose in town. So I think that that's just a terrible idea. So I think if we are going to do anything, it would be, in my opinion, UTVs. But I think we'd want to be very careful on how we're crafting that. That way we're making sure everybody and everything is safe in the process.
I think I'm a fan of, after everybody's discussion and what I've been thinking, that I'd be in agreement of the UTVs and not agreement of the ATVs as well. And I think that we should require the safety training course. And at that time, after the code would be written, they get a copy of the code so they know before they leave the ins and outs. It's really hard to say no to something because we allowed the scooters, and most of them people are not using them the way they're supposed to be used. And as far as safety, legally, you can ride a motorcycle with no helmet. So, we got to be careful what our decision, why it's being based on the way that it is. But as of now, I'm a fan of the UTVs, but I do believe whatever vehicle it may or may not be, that it cannot be on a road that it can't go the speed limit.
Any other council members have any other comments they'd like to make?
I'll just follow up with that. Yeah, the ATVs, obviously, that's a safety issue. We don't want those on the roads if we can't, if you can't be seatbelted or you don't have a cage around you, obviously. We don't need those on our city streets. The UTVs, as Councilman McIntyre said, if we go through a tagging process, so they go through a safety process, I think that's a very beneficial thing. But this is definitely something for UTVs. As long as they are sort of in the stock mode, I don't think we should have an issue with having them on the roads. And I say stock mode as in, your muffler is not very loud, and we have a noise ordinance in the city of Ottumwa. We don't want them turning them into race cars and running them up and down the road because, they do take care of them, and they take care of putting a lot of money into them. And they put a lot of money into racing vehicles, and that's not what we want on the road. We want the John Deere side-by-sides. We want the people that are out there, like the farmers that buy them, that use them up and down the road. We don't want the race vehicles on the road. So that would be, we'd have to look at that safety aspect of it and making sure that those aren't the ones that we're allowing to race up and down the roads.
I guess I'm confused. So I guess if we're allowing UTVs and then people do work to them and make them these, I don't know, race vehicles. I don't know much about them, I'll be honest. I mean, we can't say that they can't drive them if they're following the rules and the restrictions.
Right, and that's where we need to make sure that we're not allowing if they're going 35 mile an hour, that's fine. But when you get into the high performance side of it, because these get into the high performance sides.
Well, it'd just be like a car. Like if you have a race car, you have to follow the laws and the expectations.
Yeah.
So I think
And that's what I'm saying.
and the speed limit. So I think that, I think that if we make ordinance and we say it's 35, then I don't think we have to go into specifics. Just like if we say that the speed limit's 45, we're not getting specifics and saying if you have a Lamborghini, that's the car my daughter wants right now. If you have a Lamborghini, you have to, I don't think we have to specify it to that extent. I think that's what the ordinance does.
I think if you don't specify that they're not allowed to put the louder exhausts on them, because that's what they're doing, is they're putting the louder exhausts on them. I think if you're going to find that you're going to get complaints at 4:00 in the morning because people are racing up and down the road with the louder exhausts on them.
The issue that we have with that is we don't have a noise ordinance that coincides with that, with the exception of amplified noises. So, I mean, if you want to go down that road, then we need to revisit a different ordinance.
Yeah.
Is anybody else would like to speak on this topic? If you'd come up to the microphone, state your name and your address, please.
My name's Sherry Sylvester. I live at 906 Queen Anne here in Ottumwa. Kind of the difference between an ATV and a UTV. My husband and I own a UTV. 6 passenger, 6 seat belts. We have heat, we have air, we have full coverage on it. We take it out, we ride it for pleasure. It will go up to 65 miles per hour, but the speed limit in the state of Iowa is regulated. We go out with our friends on the weekends. Some of us live in town, some of us live in the county. For us that live in town, we would like to be able to ride on the roads to get to the county. Most streets in the city of Ottumwa are 35 miles or less, except the main thoroughways. None of us that own them that I know of are going to travel on Highway 34. We're not going to go across the Wapello Street Bridge. Market Street Bridge, Jefferson Street Bridge. We're not going to hold up traffic. We are all law-abiding citizens. We're not going to be out at 4:00 in the morning, running up and down the streets. We have turn signals, we have headlights. And I'll be glad to show you pictures of what we own. And I'm a big, we allow the scooters on the streets. You're supposed to be 18 and above to ride the scooters. How many 14, 15, 16-year-old kids are on scooters? And the police department can't enforce that law. So I'm just personally saying, if you know what the difference between an ATV and a UTV and the people that own them and the people that drive them, it's a big thing. I mean, like the folks here, I mean, they just want to go out and enjoy themselves. You know, if I decide I don't want to drive my car from my house to Hy-Vee, I'm not going to be on any street that I can't go the speed limit on. So, and like I said, I'd be happy to show you pictures of what we own. You know, yes, some of them have the big racing ones, but I don't think that's what you're going to find here in Ottumwa. We just spent 9 days in Mesa, Arizona, and it's a common mode of traffic for them. Common mode. I mean, you're on 6 lanes, main streets, and they're driving them up and down the street. So I think you have to respect the citizens of Ottumwa. I think the ones that own them are going to be law-abiding citizens. You know, we're not going to take them through the parks. We're not going to take them on the ponds. You know, we just want to be able to enjoy what we've bought. And like I said, you know, it's safer than being on a motorcycle, and it's bigger than a smart car. So those are just a few things. And, you know, like I said, I'll be happy to show you my pictures, and I'll be you're more than welcome to come to my house, and I'll take you for a ride.
Does
See you next
council
week.
have any questions for Sherry? Anybody have any questions for Sherry? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to briefly speak on ATVs or UTVs tonight? Could you come up to the microphone and state your name and your address, please?
I'm Joshua Luke, 725 North Foster here in Ottumwa. And there was something mentioned about stopping younger than 18 to prove that they were of age to do this. Well, that wouldn't be much different than driving a vehicle either, would it? I'm sure you have reasons that you stop traffic, people traveling, whether it's breaking the law of some sort, not using signal or running stop signs, whatever, but it's not generally to check age. Would that be correct? Question.
No, they don't stop for age verification. And that's what he was saying is they can't enforce an age. Like if we say it's under 18, they can't specifically stop them for the age. They can't look at them and say, that kid looks 16, we're going to pull them over. No, that's not something. I mean, we can say that they can't be under the age of 18, but enforcement wise, it's going to be more of a, once they pull them over because they're doing something else, then they're going to verify the age and verify that they're of age to be riding it.
Yeah, it was brought up that law enforcement will have more to deal with because of this. I don't know that to be true because you still got a certain amount of vehicles on the road, right? If I'm not in my truck, I'm in my UTV, still just another vehicle on the road.
Yeah.
That's all I had. I just wondered if that's, do you stop people to check age verification?
No, and that's kind of what he was talking about earlier is that's not something that they could currently do, and that's not something that they could do in the future.
Okay.
Age verification would come with if they stop them for another reason.
Yep. Okay.
But I do think that anytime the city has an ordinance, there's always going to be an enforcement part to that ordinance.
Sure.
And it's virtually impossible to say you're enforcing any ordinance 100% of the time because you can't be watching everybody, 26,500 people 24/7.
Right.
But I think the city does need to seriously look at, if we approve a new ordinance, how's that going to impact the enforcement of it? Because then that does start impacting other city staff. And if we have an ordinance, they are expected to enforce it. So that was the only point I guess I was trying to make earlier.
Yeah, okay. One other thing real quick, we were talking about noise as far as exhaust systems on these vehicles, and we hear plenty of motorcycles with extremely loud exhaust systems and high performance motorcycles. There's still laws out here, and we can't break those. All law-abiding citizens that are trying to get this done, that's exactly what we are. We're not trying to do it now while it's against city ordinance to break the law. We want to make it safe for everybody and be lawful at the same time.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Luke? Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on ATVs or UTVs before we move on? So Phil, do you feel you've got direction that you need from the council?
Yeah, so what I heard was the council would like to see a draft ordinance breaking out the vehicles. One thing I saw from various codes was even like where ATVs were excluded from their code, there were still exceptions to that. There was emergency usage, there was snow clearing usage, there was municipal usage. So there were some things in there. So I think I'd look to probably still have some exceptions within that. People still own the vehicles, obviously. And similarly with any of these other vehicles, if there were certain streets, crossing a highway, doing different things, that is still allowed, and we want to incorporate that as well. So if that is the direction, I'll work with our legal team to put something together. I'm looking at, it's probably going to be after the first of the year, with just a couple of meetings left here before the end of the year, and the timing of all of that. So I'd say after the first of the year, we can look for something. And I'd recommend probably having another work session, because it will be new code, have you an opportunity to weigh in on any of that before bringing that forward officially in a city council meeting. If that sounds good, then
Sounds good.
I have the direction.
Is that everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is to ask if anybody in the audience would like to speak on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Hearing none, I would go ahead then and ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway, Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
We are adjourned, and thank you everybody for attending tonight's city council meeting.